Caddis Maximus here, this time with the Harbor Freight 68971 bushing driver and installer set. I just wanted to do a quick review on these. It doesn't look like Harbor Freight's selling these anymore, and they are kind of a redundant tool, but when you have them, they are kind of handy. And these are, of course, still sold by a variety of other manufacturers online for very reasonable prices. Although reasonable is relative. I believe this set was somewhere around $30 from Harbor Freight, so that was another kind of an issue. Was a little bit more expensive for what looked like a bunch of machine, washer type looking things. Now, what these are designed for is actually installing bushings, and they have these little adapters with these steps so that the bushings will, both bushings and sleeve type bearings, bronze bearings, that type of stuff. And so they have this little taper in a variety of different sizes so that they will kind of fit inside the bushing and be able to hold steady while you drive it in. And they're handier than sockets and using other methods just because they fit inside the bore of the bushing and are a lot more stable and stay centered. One nice thing about these Harbor Freight sets is that they label every one, both the small diameter and the large diameter. So I've actually found these quite handy with the press for pressing out various bearings because you have all these different sizes. Each one you just have these nice combinations. Some are duplicated, but most are not. Like this would be a 15/16 by 1 1/16. So they've definitely been quite handy for me in that realm. And when you do, since these are a fractional or imperial, you would probably want a metric set as well so that you have a nice matching of sizes. But when you are installing bushings, sleeve bearings, needle bearings, and even a variety of ball bearings, because many of them are mounted flush, these kind of sets actually are kind of handy because you just have a nice handle to use with them. We'll just give you a quick close-up here, and that's what they are. You have it is a 19-piece set. You have 3 handles, 2 handles for the small diameter units, which I think is kind of interesting, and then 1 handle for the large diameter units. If we pull out one of these handles, they're all made pretty well. We can see that they have these nice little knurled thumb wheels to hold the little bushing or the little fitting on. And they're tolerably knurled. It's not the best, but it's not the worst either. And as we pick through these various little adapters, we can see they're not made perfectly, but they're not bad, and they are chrome plated. And I do like that they stamp the sizes on each one. There's a couple interesting caveats, like the smallest one here, which is I believe a 3/8 by 7/16. It is. When you use this, if you really need the 3/8 diameter, the little nut, even on the small one, it's too big. We can see that here. It's actually larger than 3/8, so I think that's a little bit hilarious. Is if you actually needed a 3/8, you would have to use it without the nut, and the whole idea is the nut is to keep it from sliding off. So that's one kind of interesting aspect. I shouldn't say interesting, but it's a slight oversight to include a bushing that's smaller than the thumb wheel diameter. And really the nature of these things, they don't really get stuck too bad, although it is nice that they're locked on there. They could have just put a little ball detent in here and it would have held them just fine. And so a quick demonstration, we'll choose this next size, which is 7/16 by 1/2 inch. You just put it on, put on the little thumb screw, and what's nice is you just have a bit more control. So here's a steel bushing that's sized just right. It is a 7/16 internal diameter. And so this, versus using sockets, this you just push right in there, and it's a nice fit. And you're just able to take a hammer, and let me zoom out just a little bit here, and you just hammer this in. And what's nice is you're holding it with your hands, so you're able to keep it straighter and then get nice little taps. You're not super close trying to fidget with a socket that wants to slide off. And that was the whole intended purpose of these, is just to give you some more control when you're knocking bushings in and out. And actually, I haven't used this set much, but I used it with this because it was such a thin wall, it was going to be hard to get a socket to align just right, especially when these are on a flush surface, because the socket will easily want to not want to be centered, and that makes it pretty difficult to get it started. You think you have it just perfect, and then you hit, and of course you're a little bit off, and then you damage the edge. And then these were great in that situation because I was able just to put it in there, and I knew that I wasn't going to damage the bore at all, even the edge of the bore, trying to get this out. And then I can use the same tool to get a new one back in. So that's really the big deal about these. is they just make it a little bit more professional, a little bit easier, and give you a little bit more control when you're working with small needle bearings and bushings and sleeve bearings and etc. So I really just wanted to do this review to give my impression of them. The Harbor Freight ones and these tools, I mean, the quality difference would, they probably aren't using the best steel and they may be soft, so if you're pounding a lot of very stiff bushings, especially steel ones like these, and I'm sure they'll have issues wearing out. Otherwise, there's a bit of work that goes into these sets, and that's why they're expensive, is because you have to turn all these pieces and bore them out. Quite a bit of little machining operations. And to show people what these were, a few people have seen these sets and they just don't really know what they're intended for or what they might be useful for. And hopefully this video will have cleared some of those questions. And on a last note, the great thing about this set and these type of tools here is if you know anybody with a engine lathe, a metalworking lathe, then you can make your own bushings to whatever size that you need, and you can expand out your, if you had a metal lathe, like even the little Harbor Freight, you could turn a lot of these, and you can make just a huge array of them. And that's what's kind of neat about a set like this is versus even making the handle, making the bushings, they're super simple for any kind of do-it-yourselfer. And I did want to point that out as well. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching. Please subscribe. Catus Maximus out.